the weekend we went up to an apple picking festival and saw some very interesting characters an hour and a half outside the city. Saw some Trump 2024 Make America Safe Again t-shirts. And
Is that their new slogan, Make America Safe Again?
I didn't actually see it. It was reported by the Misso. She saw someone wearing a shirt of that ilk. But yeah, there was some type of security or safety desire stated within the t-shirt. And also kind of like full grown men wearing overalls, where they kind of look pregnant and just a huge gut. It's like the word, if you've got a huge, big, fat beer and brisket gut, wearing, navy overalls is a terrible look, yet it seems to be a pretty popular choice for men in that region.
So I'm still not able to get past the Make America Safe Again shirt because I could guess, but in their mind, safe from who? Because in my mind, I know exactly who's like my most likely suspect to cause harm if I were to have a lineup of all right, you're in the US, who is most likely to have a gun and shoot up a bunch of innocent folk? It's the guy wearing that shirt.
Yeah, it's reached a point of when you say up, I hear that as down. And when I say down, you hear that as up. It's not like, oh, we're disagreeing over the shades of what is cyan or what really is teal, where people can kind of disagree on shades of color. This is just kind of like, no, when you say black, I think white. So it's crazy, but it's fun to be around. It's kind of just I get to wander around and then have no real vested interest. As long as nothing bad happens to me while I'm here for the party.
You know what's sad though? People always they make that comparison of the US being kind of like the Roman Empire in decline. But you look at the world, there's countries that have legit revolutions. There's war in Ukraine. Just recently, North Korea fired a missile over Japan. And just to know that America's downfall is going to be a bunch of fucking overall wearing, MAGA hat, fat, bloated, just fucking stupid, cracker ass QAnon dudes. This is it. This is going to be our fall of the Roman Empire because of a bunch of dickheads. I mean, I guess this is what we deserve. I don't know. I mean, fuck it. Yeah. Just embrace it. Enjoy the entertainment, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know. It kind of you can kind of glamorize history maybe a little bit and think of the opulence of the Roman Empire, but maybe they fell because of a bunch of toga wearing douchebags as well. Caesar 1008 AD make Rome safe again. Maybe that's what happened back then too. So I don't know. It's probably just the same cycles repeating over and over.
In that case, I feel much better about our decline. I'm all for it.
Yeah, it's funny because it's obviously reached kind of somewhat of a fever pitch over here, but in following along on the Australian subreddit, and people over there are complaining, and when you live in a very much a first world country such as Australia, every type of complaint has to be kind of come with a caveat to be yeah, I know I'm an educated person in Australia. I've got 1%. I'm in the 1% of the global population, but all these reasons why that place is getting worse as well. So it doesn't seem like it's just isolated to America. There's all these issues in Europe, the energy crisis, as you're probably aware of, a fallout from the Russia-Ukraine conflict. And so everywhere's getting worse, but I think maybe it's just been pretty bad here for a little while and the rest of the world is catching up. So I don't know. Let's get into the topic. Let's get into something more lighter and frivolous and fun, a family affair, if you will.
Yeah, let me give just some of my own background, because this is actually, other than just being an entertaining and horrible story, it's sort of personally relevant to me because from 2018 up until early this year, I worked for a study abroad program, specifically not in connection with the host families in the US, but doing all the testing and recruiting and documents for the children who want to go to the US. So once they're actually in the US, it's a different organization that provides them with the host families because the story we're covering today is, well, it's about a man named Dale. His name could not be any more perfect in connection with his face. Dale Leary from Florida. I believe, was it Texas or Florida? Florida.
No, it's
He's a
Florida.
man.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like some county like an hour and a half south of Miami.
That's right. Of course, he's from Florida. 50-year-old bald white dude who has a foreign exchange student from Spain, age 16. And what the story doesn't say is if he and his wife had children of their own. It just says he was married. They had a foreign exchange student from Spain who is 16, female, who came to live at their house in Florida. And when her program ended, he personally went to Spain with her to convince her parents to let her stay in the U.S. for one more year. Okay?
Well, sorry, did the dissolution of the original marriage, Dale's wife, did that happen prior to that trip?
Well, this is where the fun is. The details are not there, so there's going to be a lot of guesswork.
Great.
And
yeah.
us coming up with what's a more compelling story. What is known is he did divorce his wife, and because he's a good guy, he waited for her to turn 18, and then he married her.
Yeah, no, because he's a stand-up Floridian.
He's a stand-up guy. He waited for her to turn 18, no doubt about it. You look at him, his name's Dale. There's never been a Dale who wasn't a stand-up guy. So they're married. They're living in Florida. And if that wasn't weird enough, because there's so many questions, what was the wife's reaction? If there were kids, what were their reactions? But then this girl has a younger sister who's 14, so even younger. And somehow Dale has convinced his 18-year-old wife to convince the younger sister that living at home in Spain isn't safe, that her parents in Spain sexually molested her, and she needs to come to the U.S. So the sister comes to the U.S., and without going into details, because it gets pretty gross, this man has sexual relations with both of the sisters, including photographing them together, forcing alcohol upon them.
And it was kind of like and the article that you sent me, it showed that there was like a grooming process where he planted the idea that her biological parents assaulted her, and then he convinced her to be able to do some type of like medical check of her nether regions, and so that's, you know, like, yeah, she was young at the time, and perhaps like, I don't know, especially when her own sister is in on it and backing up Dale's story. So that was what was interesting. It wasn't just like, he tried it on to try and facilitate this weird incestual polygamous relationship from the jump. He groomed her along with the help of her sister.
I don't see any way that he wasn't grooming her. And that's what makes this story compelling in the worst possible way to me, compelling and disturbing. Because of my job, it's like we're selling this idea of like, go to America, live with the host family. And in theory, that's great stuff. And, you know, what's remarkable about these kids who do like gain these scholarships to live with an American family for a year, they're smart kids. They're like, you know, the best of the best. They stand out above the rest. They write, you know, compelling essays. They do all their things correctly. They dot all their I's and cross the T's. But even smart kids are still kids.
So like, just one sec, Dave. Just give me a second. I don't have one on me, I'm afraid. Sorry, buddy. Sorry, man. No worries. So sorry, where were we? What was that?
I was talking about like kids. Like every once in a while, you'll meet a teenager who seems wise beyond their years. They're really well spoken, coherent. They're good at formulating a thought. They write, compelling essays. And you might trick yourself into thinking, oh, this kid's quite mature. They can, carry their own in a conversation with adults. Even those kids are still stupid kids. And
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
why you can't, like, I'm not saying remove all agency from them, but 16, 17, 18, in my eyes, like, they might as well be 12. Like, this man was grooming this girl. Even if she says, like, no, I'm willing, mom and dad in Spain, I want to live with this man, I want to marry him. Like, he was such a good host dad, and he'll be an even better husband. There is definitely grooming involved because kids are stupid. All of them.
I tell you who else is stupid, and I'm naturally prejudiced towards photographers. I've got an issue with photographers. Well, and
so do I.
yeah, no, fuck it. Like photographers, bartenders, hairdressers. Let's get real. They're all trash people. I swear I'm stealing someone's bit here, but there are people. They are people who are kind of like pretend artists, and they kind of want to do something in the realm of creativity. But it's such a low barrier to entry. You buy a camera, and I'm kind of joking here, but I'm not. In the fact that I just picture this guy, this Dale fella. He's kind of like the unsuccessful middle-aged Floridian version of that creep Terry Richardson. Remember him? He was like they did all the kind of like sexy, stylized, really bright color. Miley Cyrus licking like a ice cream or whatever it was, and then years later it's like, oh, he's a creep. It's like, oh, really?
No.
That guy. Yeah.
I don't believe it.
So anyway, but I think in relation to this story, kind of, yeah, as you said, it leaves you very open to interpretation with figuring out an adaptation. But the fact that he's a photographer kind of suggests that, yeah, him and his wife maybe had a pretty loose and fast and loose thing, or I don't know. But he was always, yeah. I just heard this, like, someone break it down once where it was like young men wanna lots of young men want to find beautiful women to sleep with, and yet very few men just like find a way to put themselves in a situation where they're around beautiful women. And he says, like, he was actually giving kudos to photographers in this situation, where he goes, a lot of guys just, get a camera and learn how to use it, and then they can like take photos of beautiful girls and like establish relationships. And so I imagine that's what a lot of sickos do is they were like, well, some girls like think that, scantily clad photos are going to be their way out of their situation, and so I'll be the guy with the camera in those situations. So I think that's kind of, and the fact, because he was taking photos of these two girls as well. It's a pretty interesting kind of like it's again kind of like a way to kind of trick someone into doing something they, under the guise of art or self-expression, that in retrospect is sinister and weird and fucking against the law.
Well, one of these weird things is, sorry, let me rephrase that so it makes logical sense in English. One of the weird things about this story that came to my mind, and it's not, again, I'm not putting any of the blame on the teenagers because they are children, but I also think photographers are just the worst, like up there with DJs and,
yes,
bartenders and like beer cicerones. Jesus Christ, that's another one. Have you ever heard of cicerones? I believe it's Cicerone, but it's spelled Cicerone, and I'm going to pronounce it Cicerone. So this is like it's fairly new too. I believe it's less than a decade old. It's the beer version of a sommelier. And
okay.
These dudes pay like something like 10 grand to get certified as a beer cicerone. And like if you look at their testimonials, there's people who are like, the training is so intensive, it like even Navy SEALs can't do it. Like it's like, oh fuck off, you're the fucking clown. You're drinking beer, you dickhead. And there's guys on videos who have like 9 hour long videos where they're talking about different hops and different types of beers,
Oh,
and it's almost cult like.
Sometimes YouTube gives you an absolute gem. A couple months ago, just out of my recommended feed, it was one of those Cicerone dudes on YouTube. It was this British lad who was like, you know what I'm going to do is that I've been drinking good beer for the last 10 years, craft boutique IPAs and all that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and try some of the standard cheap lagers that I drank when I was 19 years old and first started drinking beer. And so I was just engrossed in this video where he went back and like drank Carlsberg and Heineken and just basic bitch beer that you drink when you're young. And it's the funniest shit ever, because like he does the whole kind of sommelier thing where he like pours it and it's like, yeah, that's standard amber. Look, it's pretty consistent. There's very minimal head, and then he'd whiff it and go, yep, just a little bit of corn syrup. That's all I'm getting. And then he'd do the taste test and he'd be like, yep, that's soda water with a bit of beer flavoring. There's absolutely nothing on that. And anyway, I was just howling with laughter to myself that someone it was actually kind of interesting, because I still drink those beers from time to time, and I was like, yeah, I guess it is kind of like soda water with beer flavoring and like 4.5% of alcohol mixed in. But yeah, I didn't realize they were called Cicerones, but I'm aware of their place in the universe.
And is there a better word for them than Cicerone? It just sounds so silly. And it is who they are. And there was one video, this guy, I've never seen someone like more dead behind the eyes before, like just a vacant life form. And it was like a 5 hour video, and about an hour and a half in, I was watching it with my friend, and I think he hypnotized us, because at some point there's just so much word salad going on in what this guy was talking about that my brain did not allow me to follow his words. They were all English words. They're pronounced carefully, like correctly. But I looked at my friend and I said, did you understand anything this motherfucker just said? And he's like, no, dude. And I said, okay, this is a cult. This is what cult leaders do. Like, these Cicerone guys are in some weird fucking cult where they wasted all their life savings so they could work, at a tap room and tell people they're a Cicerone. Like, that's all they'll get out of life.
Yeah, the craft beer IPA movement is pretty strong here. It seems like as men couple up, have children, and then, if they're lucky, they get a man cave to spend a few hours in each week. It seems like rather than, I don't know, going out and playing softball or something with it seems like a lot of those guys have just retreated to just getting into craft beer. And that's I had this realization a couple of years ago. I was like, our generation is going to be known as the generation that normalized drinking beer that tasted like flowers. Like, yeah. Because I was just doing it unconsciously for a while. I was like, yeah, I'll try an IPA. Like, and I realized in retrospect, I was like, I had no interest in any of the depth of flavor or the kind of. I was doing it because they generally had more alcohol in them. I was purely just doing it for the buzz. And but there's a lot of guys who. Maybe they're doing it for a similar reason, but they dress it up. That they disguise their alcohol dependency under some form of I guess skill they're learning or vocation they're participating in.
Look, man, if they're certified Cicerone, just fucking bow down, listen. They know more than you, and essentially they're better than doctors and lawyers.
Don't ask questions, just allow yourself to get cyst.
Get cyst. Anyway, I had an original point about photographers.
That they were on the level of cicerones and DJs and Anyway, you were just kind of agreeing with me that they're the scum of the earth.
But you know who loves photographers? Women. They fucking love them.
Yes.
And here's the thing. Let's say you see an attractive woman and you say, you know, stick your ass out, like, show me your feet and, like, just, like, scruff up your tits. She'd say no. It's like, wait, hold on. Pull out a nice looking camera. It can't just be your cell phone. It's got to be like a professional looking camera.
Yeah.
Say the same thing. Maybe have like a fake accent. Not an accent that's like natural to anywhere, but kind of indistinguishable. Like the guy's probably American, but he puts emphasis on the wrong word sometimes just so he seems, like mysterious enough.
Yeah, totally.
Then you've got it. So
what type of tone? Because with this movie, it's this story rather, it's dark as fuck. And I think personally the most interesting part is like the story of a middle-aged man trading in his middle-aged wife for a younger model. That's a tale as old as time. But the really interesting part is the fact that he was able to turn out the OG sister and get her on the recruiting recruiting from her own family. It's like a pyramid scheme type of story. And so that turn there, like how did he manipulate her? What's her character like is for me, I think, the kind of most interesting part of this whole thing. But like what tone, if this was going to be adapted, how would you approach this?
Well, part of me thinks that when you look at him, he's not what I would call a catch. And I don't want to vilify people without evidence, but a part of me thinks there must have been something between her and her natural parents back in Spain to have her get this connection with Dale. And I'm not going to go as far as to say, like, oh, they definitely abused her, molested her, but there had to have been conflict of some sort. I'm just guessing, because why else would she be so receptive to Dale's advances?
That's interesting. Yeah, maybe, or even if they were just like emotionally distant, then right. And so he is a predator, so he was able to identify that and then figure out, oh, there's an opening for my weird shit because she was neglected in some way, and then he just capitalized on that opportunity.
And unlike our previous one, where we didn't want to make light of someone's suicide, like with one of those stories that, like, if you make it too fictionalized, those are real people. But in the case of Dale, fuck Dale. So I don't really care how he comes off in this thing. Having said that, because there is nothing in the reporting as to whether he had children or not, in the movie he would have children. And because they're fictional children, I don't have to feel bad about, like, putting a bad spin on who his real children were. Like, these are completely fictional children in a story based on Dale's life. And in my mind, there would be a daughter and a son. Because how fucked would that be if there's a son who is a similar age to the foreign exchange student? So imagine you're in high school. You're a dumb kid, lives in Florida. And one day your parents are like, oh, we have a foreign exchange student coming. And before you've even seen her, you're already getting excited. You're talking with your friends. Like, dude, like some hot European chick is going to live at my house. And even if she's not, again, I'm not talking about teenagers. I'm talking about how we as teenagers thought. Like, even if she's not like the most beautiful thing ever, I think the fact that she's foreign and living in your house in your like little kid teenage mind, like, makes her just more attractive, like twofold, just by virtue of being that, like, oh dude, European girl living in my house, fuck yeah. And then all your friends are gonna always want to come over, and people who didn't used to come over to your house are gonna want to come over more to like just like see the foreign exchange student for a minute or two. So imagine like almost a rivalry between the son and his dad, affection of this girl staying at their house, all happening under like their mom and sister's noses.
And is Dale in your fictional movie, is he doing dastardly deeds with his own biological kids as well, or does he draw the line there?
I don't think so. I think he draws the line there, which is how, people of that ilk justify it. Like, well, I would never do incest, or I would never do gay shit. It's like, yeah, just like, and
everything else is fair game though.
they're European. They drink when they're 5, and in France, 12's the age of consent. Like probably something like that is going through his mind. The Europeans, they're more free with their love over there. Us Americans, we're Puritans.
All right, interesting. So yeah, when in your movie, when the first betrayal happens, Dale successfully initiates a relationship with the eldest Spanish sister, and the wife, the middle-aged wife, is kicked to the curb. And you can make her like, maybe she was a model in her younger years. Like, she used to be a hot babe, but now she's got like a barbed wire tattoo, and she's got the face ravaged by the Floridian sun. And she used to be a Florida 8. Now she's a Florida 5.5. And so time to trade her in. Like, so he gets into a relationship with the eldest Spanish sister. That relationship breaks down. Are you kicking out? Is he moving into a new beach shack with the Spanish sister? Is there a separation, or is this all still happening under one house?
Well, I think it should be one of those things where Dale, he's such a Dale man, classic Dale, that the moment he's like sealed the deal with his exchange student, it's like, all right, baby, life begins now. My kids, forget them. I don't have any kids. I don't have a wife. And he just like separates himself from that part of his life. So not only does he ruin his marriage, but like his kids who he's raised, who are almost as adults themselves. Fuck you guys, get out of here. I'm with her now. Whatever her name was, Santa Rosa, I think, or something like that.
Something like that. It's weird how I was
Martin Jose, sorry.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, like how middle-aged men with their midlife crises, how I was doing it before with the craft beer fellas when they're in their 30s and 40s. You can't help but look at them and go, you sad piece of shit. Like, you don't have any friends anymore. You're afraid of your wife. You're a pussy at work. You don't stand up for yourself. Kind of like the Kevin Spacey in American Beauty experience. Right. And then in that movie, they gave him a midlife crisis where he breaks bad, and he's kind of turned into a hero a little bit to buck the trend and stand up for himself and say fuck you to his wife and his boss, and just do what he wants to say. And there's an underage relationship in that, but this is kind of like a Floridian version of American Beauty, kind of. But in real life, when men have midlife crises, no one ever says, "Oh, well done, you listened to our advice, you stood up for yourself." It's 99% of the time you're like, "Oh, you went too far in the other direction, bro. Like, you got streaks in your hair even though you're 57 years old, and now you're driving like a secondhand Porsche from 2007." Like, they always fuck it up. Like, it's someone who's like been they haven't been cool for 20 years, and so their idea of like what a cool guy does or says or looks like is just so misguided. So I've never seen a man nail a midlife crisis in reality.
No. And I was thinking, actually, like, some interesting setup for this kind of story is maybe his wife is mentioning like the husbands in the neighborhood or just amongst acquaintances, like, oh my God, like John on the other side of the block, like, he has this man cave and his wife is bitching about it. So and so has gotten into craft beer, and she's just, making fun of how pathetic it is of what these men are going through in their midlife crises. And Dale's just going, yeah, so pathetic. And like on his mind, he's just like, I'm gonna nail that girl. Like, I can't
Yeah,
like
let's take this to the
wait
next
till she
level.
gets here. And I was thinking, like, I would want the story. It shouldn't be sugar coated, but similar to our story about the twins, I don't want like the media frenzy to be the story. It's much more interesting just being in people's heads. So I would want the protagonist to be Dale and his son. So like
Mm.
show what Dale does, but then also show how this just absolutely ruins his son's life. Because one, he was also really into this girl who's his own age, and
Mm.
maybe not like a stereotypical Hollywood loser, but just an average kid. An average kid
Yeah.
who's like, oh wow, once in a lifetime chance. I have this like beautiful exchange student living at my house. Holy shit, my dad not only like got there first but married her. So like the high of him meeting this exchange student and then the low of not only when his dad marries her, but this does get out. Like how do you think his like final year at high school would be? It's like, dude, your dad fucked your like exchange sister and left your mom. Kids are ruthless. There's no way that kid's life wouldn't be ruined.
Yeah, and I guess maybe like the Hollywood version of this story, if you invented a fictional son who became Dale's rival, the Hollywood third act conclusion would be the son enacting revenge because Dale took the hot Spanish exchange student and then brought shame upon his family because of all the abuse with the other sister. So the Hollywood guy son would fight back, but there's this Australian movie called The Snowtown, which is about, I think, this serial killer in Australia called John Bunting, who I believe is still to this day the most successful, as in he killed the most people, serial killer. He killed like 14 people, and they were all like people he knew, with connected through like his new partner, like circle in this part of Adelaide, and he got help through his partner's son, and they had kind of like a father stepfather relationship. And in the movie, it's kind of hinted at that the son, the young guy, is gonna like rebel and kind of like take him down, but spoiler alert, that kind of doesn't really happen because he's just a kid and he kind of just goes along with it. And I thought it was kind of perfect that you see someone kind of understanding that, oh yeah, I am being manipulated. My father is a piece of shit, or my stepfather is a piece of shit. Here's the right thing I should be doing, but then they're not brave or noble or experienced enough to know what to do. And so then, yeah, just a car crash happens around them, and they can't really do anything about it. It's kind of like a more terrifying and realistic sequence of events if you were an actual young kid in that situation.
How common do you think something like this is? And not necessarily where it actually, in Dale's case, in his mind, success, he married the girl. But how often do you think it happens where foreign exchange student comes and the dad's got the hots for a girl of, say, 14, 15, 16, whether he acts upon it or not?
This is a really good. It's a weird question in that, like, I saw this photo on Twitter the other day. I'm not sure how much time you spend on Twitter, but especially in kind of like the alt literature community, indie writing community, there are tons of people who are kind of like conservative, right wing, and some of them are doing it as kind of like shock value and as a way to kind of like be a reactionist and generate interest because you're saying something that goes against the current kind of neoliberal paradigm. But there are other people you can tell it's authentic and they really believe in like family values and Jesus and all this like traditional values, but they like writing horror stories or something. It's just a funny juxtaposition because usually artists are kind of like feeble lefty type of people. But anyway, someone shared this picture of, it's some type of like Mormon-esque sect of people. They might be Mennonites or I don't know, but they didn't seem like all dressed up in garb. I think it actually might be related to Mexico or something as well, where they're people that are kind of like white like you and I, but they're spread across the States and Mexico, kind of like Mitt Romney's background, Mexican compounds. And anyway, there was this family photo of them where someone had shared and said, oh, this is like my extended family, or like my sister, my wife's extended family or something. And it was this big 2-story mansion house, and there was like 5 brothers, and they all had a wife, and they had like 30 kids in front of them and like the grandparents. It was just like all these people who are relatively young, like in their like mid-30s or close to 40, but all of them seemed to have like 5 or 6 kids. And it was just kind of like the part of their tradition or religious upbringing to like go buck wild and have tons of kids. And they clearly spent a lot of time with each other. And in the comments, people were saying, yeah, this looks like one big happy family, but you'll find out in years to come, tons of people in this photo will be fucking each other that shouldn't be fucking each other. And it was such a bizarre thing for me to think about, because I think that I come from a family where, you know, my parents grew up in big families, tons of siblings, but then I just have one sister, and then like I now only have one kid. Like across the world, generally speaking, first world countries, the nuclear family is shrinking. And so it was just such a foreign alien idea to me that like, oh yeah, but it made sense though, right? In that if there are tons of people and there's just more chance to have a deviant in the family or multiple deviants, and then people get drunk and then like have a fling or do something stupid. And it just made me think that 100% this type of stuff would still happen. And no matter what culture you're from, the shame of coming forward with any type of story like this, where, you know, even if it's direct nuclear family abuse, or even if it was just like an uncle or an aunt doing something, even hooking up with each other, how it's those type of stories would stay way more buried. Or even if it came out, right, even if it was like this happened, we know about this, a lot of people were just like, but we're agreeing not to talk about it, right? Because we have to keep, the show must go on. This big family compound must continue. So, yeah, I think this type of stuff would happen a lot. You'd only hear about it if shit got really bad, like in this story with Dale and his family.
Well, this is because it's in Florida. When this news came out, how many people do you think were like, what's wrong with that?
Maybe, well, that's the kind of strange part of Florida, though, isn't it? It's kind of like you're free to do whatever the fuck you want, but then once you go past a certain threshold, there is a strong conservative like, no, with family values, geez, you know, like that. It's a bizarre, almost a weird trap to put weirdos in, to be like, yeah, you can go, you know, there's like nudist beaches there and kind of like swinger communities, and you can imagine it's all free love and do all the drugs you want, but then like, oh, if you're trafficking drugs, no, that's right. Bad news bears. So I like that kind of contrast as well, where you could kind of, someone like Dale could think that he's above the law because he's in Florida, and then he traverses a invisible line that he was unaware of, and then gets completely fucked.
So not even movie Dale, just Dale. With the limited information we have in the articles, and I read another one just to like check different sources, and they mostly say the same thing. There's not any revolutionary like new information. Do you think in Dale's case, is he remorseful about any of this, or is it just one of those he's remorseful that he got caught?
Yeah, I think he'd be remorseful that he got caught. Like I was trying to do a thought experiment in terms of how would you, if you were this guy, how would you feel? How would you rationalize your behavior to yourself, or kind of like move forward or move past it. And yeah, I feel like I don't know. For some people, sex is everything. Like I saw an interview with Cardi B, and they were like, would you rather be poor, and you can have sex, or be rich, and you can never have sex? And she was like, oh, I'd be poor. I can't give up sex. Like that's everything to me. And when you think about it, it's kind of like, yeah, sex and drugs, if you're poor, is kind of like, it's a free ticket to bliss that you can, if you stay alive, you can experience every day. So for some people, I think that polite society and the concept of trying to build a career and network and like plan family vacations and like all this stuff, like I'm extrapolating here, but like someone, Dale, maybe he tried to do that for years and like had a bit of fun on the side, like had some side chicks and stuff like that. And then just the kind of like the compulsion, almost the teenage compulsion that you're meant to grow out of. I think just for some people, they never grow out of it. And if anything, it gets stronger. The urge to just like satiate your kind of id. The id is everything for some people. So if I had to hazard a guess, I reckon Dale would be someone like that, where he tried to suppress it, put things on top of it, and maybe he just had a high sex drive and he wasn't a deviant when he was younger, but because he tried to suppress it, then that's what turned him into doing illegal shit down the line, because he fucked up. He should have just been a single guy his whole life, and you know, that's my kind of completely I just guessing here, but that's my guess in terms of how he ended up where he ended up.
I hate using interesting in stories like this, so I'll try to find a different word. Revealing. What I find revealing, though, is he waited for the first sister to turn 18 before marrying her. But then the second sister, he had no qualms about having sexual relations with her when she was 14. But then again, he married her at 18. That says nothing of what they were doing before she turned 18. For all we know, like even during her first stint as an exchange student, they were already doing things like in the same house when the wife was still there. So I really
100%.
Yeah.
And also I guess you can kind of see, and this would be like something that you could definitely weave into the story, where just kind of like the son, he hears the fact that a Spanish exchange student's coming to stay and he thinks he's hit the jackpot. Maybe Dale thinks he's hit the jackpot when he sees a photo of the younger sister in Spain. So like that's his jackpot. So him not blowing his wad, if you will, and actually being strategic and waiting till she was 18 so that they could have like a legitimate marriage in the eyes of the Lord, because that's really going to lead him to the honeypot that he was actually after. So maybe that's why he followed his due diligence for the first one so he could get the second one.
Oh, Dale.
Yeah, I know.
I was thinking in terms of an actor, because you see his photo. It's a bald, pasty white dude. And I think the generic option would be Woody Harrelson. But I think even when he plays a bad guy, Woody Harrelson he's likable.
Yeah, totally.
I think you can't have that. You don't want Dale to be likable. Like I don't want you to be tricked into accidentally liking him. Did you ever see I think it's the first adaptation of Lolita, the one made by Stanley Kubrick?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So it's actually it's quite a funny movie. He almost turns it into a comedy. And what he does in the movie, he makes the lead, what's his name, Humpert.
Yeah.
He makes him charming and very likable.
Yeah.
Which I would not want to do with this movie. You wouldn't need to like beat the audience over the head with it. Like Dale doesn't think he's the villain, and the movie
Mm.
wouldn't be like, "Hey, by the way, he's the villain." Just his actions speak for themselves. He's not a good dude. So maybe it's stunt casting, but I was almost thinking you don't have to have a bald actor. You could get any good actor and shave his head.
Mm.
So why not Christian Bale? Because
Mm.
not a good movie, but recently he was in that Thor movie where he was bald and he had a bunch of like white powder caked on his face. And he was really interesting looking. Like I think he's got an interesting shaped head and he's got kind of a weird shaped mouth. So when he's bald, you're drawn to his face.
Mm.
And he could I think the fact that he's a good actor whose American accent still sounds kind of odd, it doesn't sound
Mm.
100% authentic, would actually kind of add to someone like Dale, that photographer with like the faux fake accent,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
the faux charming, even though he's kind of weird looking, maybe someone out there finds something charming about him.
Yeah, that's an amazing call. Now you've said it, I can't really think of anyone else because yeah, he would also kind of have that very fierce dominance over his kid as well, where he can be pretty frightening when he turns it on. And yeah, and I'm imagining maybe not at the level of the machinist, but like
Mm.
a wiry kind of like yeah, maybe used to juice at the gym a few years ago, but he's laid off that now. But he's still kind of got the heroin chic muscles. Dale, tanned as fuck. Yeah, so I could definitely see old mate Christian pulling that off. Any other actors you'd imagine involved of note?
Um, for the son, I forget his name, and it's entirely possible he's way too old now. But did you ever see a movie? Oh, Jesus Christ. I don't even know the name, but it's interesting. It's a movie where there was a teenage son who had like this all-American dad who was like a scout leader for the Boy Scouts, you know, super Christian. And it turned out his dad was like this really fucked up, weird serial killer. I think it was called the Clove Hitch Killer.
I never saw that one. No.
Is a pretty good movie, and not in an insulting way. I'm gonna look it up right now, but the teenage son was kind of like the definitive, like boring American son, like not a nerd, not a loser, just like a white kid who goes to school and he's average. He's like respectful to his parents, but nothing insulting about him. If your daughter brought him home, like dad, like he's gonna take me to prom. Like, all right, you look like a good kid. Like, have a good time.
Mm.
So let me find him.
I'm trying to think. I think it's funny when oftentimes it doesn't work, but when they take like a beautiful actress and they kind of make her a bit dumpier and
Sure.
uglier, but in terms of the wife, for some reason I'm thinking like the eldest, the OG Floridian wife. I'm thinking like Jennifer Aniston might be funny, where she's like well and truly, I don't know, deep in her 40s, early 50s now, and you could kind of make her look just absolutely destroyed by the son, and so she might be funny to play the wife.
And you could always like ugly an actress up. I mean, they did it with Charlize Theron in that one movie where she's like
Yeah.
unrecognizable. So this kid now, he's not so much a kid anymore. In all his like photos, he looks like a handsome actor. But specifically in that movie, he was like the prototypical American teenage son. And I think he'd be a good choice for the son. And for the wife, yeah, like someone like Jennifer Aniston, uh, like same with Christian Bale. Like you don't need an ugly woman to play an ugly character, just like you don't need a bald
Mm.
man to play a bald character.
Yeah, and I think you know what. with Jennifer Aniston as well, I'd like to kind of see is even in, I'm not sure if you ever saw that Horrible Bosses movie. She was really
I did.
funny in, but she was still playing, even though she was like playing a cunt essentially. She was still whip smart and kind of like but so it'd be interesting to watch her play like a dumb person. I always like that when people people are often typecast because they're with their looks, but then often it's just kind of like they play the same, like fucking Ryan Reynolds or Chris Pratt. They always have the same kind of like intelligence level. So I think it's fun when people, I think it's difficult to actually play like a dumb person convincingly. And it would be kind of cool to see her flex, see if she's got that within her.
Dumb people are constantly saying funny lines, which in real life, dumb people are usually pretty boring. Like they're not witty. That's why I really, really love Robert De Niro in Jackie Brown.
Yeah.
Because you're Tarantino, De Niro, he's going to give him all the whippy dialogue, but he does the exact opposite. He makes him a dork. He makes him kind of a loser.
Dim.
Yeah. He's just dim. And that's like what a true dumb person kind of is. Like they might have some good qualities, but they're not going to be like saying memorable quotes or witty dialogue or having quick Aaron Sorkin comebacks coming right at you.
Did you see that HBO series, The White Lotus, the one where it's set in Hawaii?
I have not, but I've heard a lot about it.
Yeah, no, I didn't watch the first season. It was one of those where I was like, looks kind of interesting, but then because just the premise itself in terms of like interconnected storylines at a hotel, I was like, oh, I'm in. But then I watched the trailer and none of the actual kind of like characters or stories grabbed me. But the second season, I think I'll give it a go because they're doing, it's essentially the same premise where it's at a new White Lotus hotel, but this time set in Sicily. And the characters in this one look way more interesting, at least to me. But yeah, they've got one of the subplots, I watched the trailer yesterday, is Michael Imperioli, aka Christopher from Sopranos, and he's gone to Sicily with his father and his son. So it's like a 3-generation boys trip. But then he's just like using local Sicilian hookers and like trying to keep it quiet that he's cheating on his wife while he's on vacation with while he's there with his kid and his father. And so anyway, it actually looks really good, the second season, so I think I'll give it a go.
See, that sounds interesting because already I think I might have even mentioned this on a podcast. If I haven't, whatever. I fucking love anything set in Italy. It could be the biggest piece of crap movie. If it's in Italy, I'll watch it. But you have Michael Imperioli in it, and I'm there. However, it's depressing how old he looks. Like, he looks so much older than he is. Because you watch The Sopranos, and goddamn, every actor on that show has such a face, such a unique face. And then you see him now, and goddamn, he's gotten droopy, man.
What? Yeah, just the gray hair. Like, I'm intrigued by some dudes can rock gray hair. They look good. They look good when it first starts coming in at the sides, and and then they eventually graduate to being a full blown silver fox. They can pull that off, and in a weird way, it doesn't make them look older somehow. They look just as attractive and
look cooler.
Yeah, I know. But then other men with gray hair, it's like that looks disgraceful. Like I don't know. And with Michael Imperioli, is it because he's just like that character, the Christopher character is so definitive, and you've got his face and his hair stamped in your mind and it's unchangeable? Is that what the issue is with how old he looks now?
It almost seems like a betrayal. It's like, how dare you? How dare you change and grow up and have a different voice? Like not even him, but James Gandolfini too, which is a testament to how good they are as actors. But the fact that those Jersey Italian accents aren't even the real voices also feels like a betrayal to me.
Yeah, there's this comedian Jimmy Dore who is, I believe, in his like early 60s now, but he said recently that his like hairdresser has finally said to him like, look, I've got to like let a little bit of gray start coming in at the sides. I can't just dye your whole head. It's starting to look ridiculous. Kind of like when Paul McCartney stopped dipping his hair in soy sauce like 5 years ago, and then he's like 75 years old and finally let it go gray. Because at a certain point, I don't know, you just can't, you don't buy it anymore.
You look like Dracula.
Yeah, exactly. And he was like, yeah, but the reason I started doing it is because he was like went prematurely gray, and he was like, I was 29 years old and I started to get like, you know, my gray hair went all through my head. He goes, I just didn't look 29 anymore. So it's this strange thing where it's like another dude who started to go gray at 29 would kind of rock it. But for him, he was like, no, this makes me look 10, 15 years older. So it's very, we have such meticulous appraisals and judgments upon the way other people groom themselves. But then if you're an intelligent person, you have to acknowledge your huge blind spot you have with your own appearance. and just the concept of body dysmorphia is strange to me. I was just like, yeah, that's if you're an intelligent person, you're meant to have that. Like you're always second guessing how you look, or you're always kind of like not happy with your current state of how you're wandering around in the world. But you've got to try and limit that. And when as you age, make intelligent decisions about how to groom yourself, what type of haircut you should have, and what type of clothes you should wear. Because yeah, it's embarrassing, and it just makes people hard to look at when they fuck things. Like Christopher, I just don't know why didn't he dye his hair? He should have dyed. But maybe that's the thing. If you fuck up and you're like, oh, I'm just too lazy to, and then it goes fully gray, then you kind of can't come back from that because everyone knows you got gray hair.
Well, it's one of those fucked up things where if you're like, let's just wait and see, maybe I'll look good with gray hair, and then you don't, and people have seen you, then they'll know that you're starting to dye your hair. I think the rule of thumb, as unfair as it is, if you're already like a stud before you go gray, chances are you'll probably pull it off. And like as simple as that. And if you're just kind of a normal looking dude and you go gray, it's kind of unfortunate.
Not gonna look great. Yeah.
And if you're already like fuck ugly, no one's looking at you anyways, at least not in the way you want them to.
Did you see that in in that movie Shallow Hal, Jack Black and Jason Alexander from Seinfeld? In that movie, Jason Alexander wore a toupee, so he had full head of hair, even though everyone had seen him on Seinfeld for 10 years, bald as a badger. And yet, it was something like 5 years after Shallow Hal came out. So everyone had seen him do the joke of him wearing a toupee, and they also made fun of it on Seinfeld where he wore a toupee for an episode. Right. But it was way after that he just rocked up to a red carpet one night in a toupee, like not as a joke, not as like a callback bit to being like, oh yeah, remember when I did this on Seinfeld or Shallow Hal? He just thought, no, I'm gonna do the on his own volition, that I'm just gonna wear a wig and people are gonna accept me. Perhaps one of the most famous bald men in entertainment history is that my male pattern baldness has reversed overnight. I just, that was like, that blew my mind, because you like to think, especially people within the business of like comedy, where it's all about making fun of yourself and drawing the tragedy of your own folly, that you would have some self-awareness of your position in your world. But I think that was like a eye-opener to me, that like the pull of show business, or like the concept of like trying to be attractive, or like, is people are never immune to that desire to want to try and fix themselves or be seen as attractive, no matter what type of like clown you have presented yourself in your life in any format.
Well, now that I know that you also listen to Red Bar, I've recently discovered that comedians, again, people who like make a living out of making fun of others and themselves, like shitting on themselves, are still like the most insecure people in the world
Yeah.
often. And a lot of them, like once they've reached a certain level of success, being a funny person isn't good enough. It's like, no, no, man, like I'm a sex machine too. I'm so fucking cool. I'm super good at pool and sports and I go to the gym and I work out. Like it's not enough just to be someone who makes people laugh. You have to be like desirable. You have to be a sex symbol. And Jason Alexander, it's like the world knows you're bald. We've seen you bald, but ego mixed with insecurity, mixed with actors lying for a living, a small part of them probably thought like if I show up with hair, people will just be, oh, he has hair, and that's what my image is going to be. Not a bald
Mm.
man. People are going to see me with hair, and from here on out, I'm the guy with hair.
Yeah, it's like I saw one person who kind of went through that very Hollywood transformation was the comedian Jim Jeffries, who a lot of people
Oh
assume
yeah,
that I'm a massive fan of because I'm also Australian. I've never hated him, but I've just found his like humor very ham-fisted, kind of obvious shit. And
hmm,
he got that Comedy Central show, and
right.
then like yeah, he like lost weight, quit drinking, got some like head things at the front because he
Hmm.
was balding at the front, and I think that's fine. Like I have no issue with when people it's like a fat comedian loses weight, they kind of like lose a part of their shtick. I think
Yeah,
you gotta. I have no issue with someone like bettering themselves, but you like if you're a comedian, you've got to make fun of yourself as you're
because
bettering
someone else
yourself
is
as
going
well.
to. Yeah.
Yeah, you got to beat them to the punch, essentially. So I have no idea whether Jim Jeffries is doing that, but and another one who just seemingly went completely off the deep end was Dane Cook. Have you seen what Dane
Oh
Cook's
yeah.
face looks like these days? It's
Oh
insane.
yeah. And yeah, yeah. And he's another one. Doesn't he have like a 21-year-old wife or something like that?
Real
Or girl?
young. Yeah, and
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and like I think I'm not sure if it was Red Bar himself, but people those internet investigators, the
Yeah.
PIs on the internet had done some sleuthing in terms of like, oh yeah, they first met one another. She was coming over for like parties when she was 16 and stuff. There's some like group photos there of anyway, but it's unsurprising that yeah, I remember when I visited a buddy a few weeks ago in Baltimore and all that shit about the Maroon 5 Adam Levine stuff came out. He was cheating on his wife, and my friend is so completely oblivious to he doesn't watch the news, doesn't look at tabloid shit on the internet, doesn't have social media. And I mentioned, oh, did you? I don't even know. It's one of those things. I was like, why am I mentioning this? But I mentioned that to him. He was like,
Like,
yeah. He goes, yeah, that's the least surprising thing I've ever heard. A
no,
fucking rich,
exactly.
famous, attractive guy with a lot of women who are interested in him is throwing some dick around. Like, yeah, that's what happens. And yeah, human nature, baby.
Especially because I don't give a shit about Adam Levine. But I guess the people who like his music are the ones who would be upset when they find out he's cheating. And this
Yeah,
isn't
totally.
condoning cheating either. It's saying that don't open your eyes. He's Adam Levine. Like same with Tiger Woods. Like just because he talks like Dave Chappelle's impression of a white person doesn't mean he ain't Tiger Woods. You know, like like that guy. You don't need me to tell it. I don't know how many porn stars he slept with.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I don't know. I feel like sometimes when people have read I'm not sure if you've ever encountered this when people have read my book and then like I just chat with them, they expect me to be some type of like deviant, and I like to think I'm a relatively normal person. It's like, oh yeah, because Adam Levine sings songs, love songs, and cheesy, kind of like my heart will go on, I'll love you forever type of shit. His reality doesn't align, and so if you create fucked up, weird art, you kind of people are expecting you to you get you get permission to act like that if you want. And so if you're it kind of like we've got a better way where it's like you want to come in with low expectations for people. So if you act like a normal considerate person. They're like, wow, he's a really great guy. It's like, no, I'm not. I'm just completely normal, but you just have
Right.
very low, yeah, because I've written about despicable characters and propagated like horrendous ideas in my book. You have just extremely low expectations about
Well,
what things I aspire to, be.
that's what's fun about writing, man. You're allowed to write about anything, no limits, like whatever your imagination wants. And if people can't separate the art from the artist, then that is sad. Like, it's weird. I'm a big fan of listening to Stephen King's talks, even though I'm not the biggest fan of his books. But I like listening to the way he speaks and the way he does Q&As. And granted, he fucked with a ton of drugs back in the day, but he seems like the least violent, like least cynical, like pretty sincere guy. And that's a testament to his talent that he can write these like really fucked up books that I might not personally love, but I love that he's doing it.
Yeah. I wonder with my own kind of output, like there's that David Lynch movie where David Lynch has all these kind of like fucked up, Jungian explorations of your inner psyche and like all the kind of like his early films are all like that. And then he just did one like extremely heartfelt movie where it's about a dude driving a tractor. I've never seen it, but people rave about it. And it's like, I think people watched that movie when it came out expecting like a dark turn at some point to be like, oh yeah, there's the old man's going to lose it and start running people over on his tractor or something. And I don't think he does. I think it's just like this sweet story that lasts throughout. And I'm like, I wonder if I'll ever have an idea like that where it'll just be kind of like a sentimental kind of like, not because from time to time I don't mind a story like that. And but I literally never have any type of creative ideas that are even in the realm of that, where it's like, oh, it's, like even Ricky Gervais will have like his stories have kind of like dark pockets or kind of like showcase like the people being greedy or self-obsessed and all that stuff, but his comedic stories generally have kind of like a positive, like life-affirming takeaway. And I was like, I don't have that whatsoever. Like I've never, I'm wondering, I'm leaving the door open, but it's an interesting, because I like to think I'm open to any idea, but there's a part of my brain that just anything cheesy or sentimental, I just like, it's like a bouncer preventing those ideas from getting inside the club. Do you feel like that at all? Do you ever have an idea where it's like, oh, I want to write about that, but it's too cheesy, or do they just not occur to you?
See, I'm actually really receptive to cheesy stuff. I love like heartfelt, corny bullshit. Like recently, it's on Netflix. It's an old show, but it's new to Netflix. It's a Japanese show where parents just send their children, like sometimes as young as 2, to go to the store by themselves and like try to buy the things they told them to buy. Like in the very first episode, there's a 2-year-old with like boogers coming out of his nose. He's holding like this big sign so cars don't hit him. And he walks a kilometer to the grocery store to pick up like 4 items. And he fucking does it. And of course the camera crew's like never too far away in case like the little dumbass does run into the street. But that's the entire show. Like stuff like that. There's no like cynical ulterior motive. It's just cuteness for cuteness sake. And I dig it. But whether I write it or not, I am not capable of like not self-sabotaging. Like even if I have a goal to write like a straightforward, serious horror story, like maybe I want to write a story about alien abduction and it's supposed to be like dark and scary and taken seriously. Like 3 minutes in, I'll get bored and I'll be like, what if the aliens are like just white people in blackface? It's like, why did I do that? Like, why did I include something so stupid that's going to derail the story and be offensive for no reason when I didn't have to do it? Like, I'm sandbagging myself, but that's the way my brain works. I always think at any given moment, what's the most stupid thing that could happen to derail a serious moment? And that's kind of how I operate.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that, yeah, like yourself, I don't mind sentimental. You're like, it sounds like that Japanese show is almost like a Japanese Impractical Jokers, but with kids. And I love Impractical Jokers clips, just the, dumb shit, howling with laughter. But I feel like I don't like sentimentality. I've come to realize, because when someone is sentimental with you in real life, I just don't trust it. It's kind of like you're drunk, or you want something from me, or you've done something wrong and you're trying to disguise it with being sentiment. Like there's just like a knee-jerk reaction against sentimentality that I have in my waking life that I think bleeds over to my internal interpretation of sentiment. I would consider myself like a romantic, but I like the concept of romance and serendipity and that kind of like weird putting yourself in the right situation to have a good experience and meet the right person. I like all that shit, but the concept of like being sentimental, like, wasn't it great when? I'm just kind of like disgusted by. And so I think I try and run away at every opportunity.
I believe everything in due course. Like, I think a problem I might share with you with sentimentality is it's often forced. It doesn't come up in a natural way or in a natural moment. And that's why my reaction to it is like, ugh, that's icky, that's gross. I'm sure there's been moments where it was genuine, but they're so few and far between that my gut instinct as well is to be kind of repulsed by it.
Yeah, I'm leaving the door open here because I think it's also just maybe that I have like very typically masculine inadequacies when it comes to dealing with certain emotions. Like, I remember when it was actually my first trip to Medellin, I made a friend there, this American guy, came good buddies, spent some time with each other, and then on the day I was leaving or something, he sent me a text. He was like, "Good to see you, and for most, good to meet you. See you next time." That's what most men would do. Then he followed it up with, "I'm glad I met you." And I was like, "Oh, I don't know where to put that." I don't know. I'm not upset that he said that, and I felt the same way. I was like, "Oh, it's great. I met a cool new person. I've got a new friend in my world. That's sick. I'll see him again someday." But it was just like the concept of expressing that earnestly. I was like, "Yeah, I can't give or receive that, I'm afraid." But yeah, I just didn't say anything, and I'm glad it was in a text message. If he told it to my face, fucking hell, that would have been really tough.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. All right.
Then you have to kiss him.
Yeah, I know, exactly. Just let's just go straight to the bedroom. Let's get this over and done with. What would Dale do? All right, another ep in the bag. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to us on YouTube. Podcasts are going to be big on YouTube. I've heard some. I think that's the type of thing Gary Vee would say. So let's push people there. All right.